We're going to be ranking all 7 playable class in Blade and Soul NEO Classic today and giving you a breakdown of what each of them does so you can decide which class you want to play on launch. Starting with Assassins, best damage dealer in the entire game. Assassins mostly has like a stealth DPS playstyles, and the stealth mechanics can cheese a lot of the early bosses because they don't see you and they don't aggro on you. It also means that Assassins don't have to worry about taking aggro away from your tank because you're going to be stealth and the boss is almost never going to aggro on you, so you can just full pump DPS. Here you can see that Assassins can just cheese one of the harder challenges in the entire game by being stealth. The enemy AI just stand there and do not attack you, and so you can just get free damage off. This is actually Mushin Tower Junghado, and it's one of the harder early roadblock for a lot of new beginner players, and a lot of people get stuck on this boss, but an Assassin can just cheese for the entire boss for free. Assassins also have one of the best offensive utility in the entire game, which is Blue Buff. Blue Buff is basically a party-wide buff that gives everyone a bunch of crit damage, and pretty much every single party in the game is gonna want a Blue Buff. So that means Assassins get a higher priority when it comes down to making your dungeon team. Now, if you're new to Blade and Souls, know that party utility do not stack, and this is going to go for the rest of the list as well. But the thing with Blue Buff is that it has a 45-second global cooldown, so that means you can't get another Blue Buff within 45 seconds, but the actual skill itself has a 1 minute 30-second cooldown. That means you can have 2 Blue Buff users in your party rotating between Blue Buff, so even though you have 1 Assassin in your party already, you can always take another one and just have them rotate the buff, and it's just that powerful, and Assassins can always very easily get into party. Assassins also have 2 more amazing utility, including a party stealth, which is like a one-hit iframe for your entire party, as well as a taxi service. Assassin has an ability that allows you to teleport your entire party onto you, and so basically what people is going to do in the dungeon is that an Assassin's going to go into stealth, he's going to run past all the mob, and then he will teleport your entire party onto you, skipping past all the mob. And this is a huge time saver in dungeon, and it's what people like to call taxi servers, because the Assassin just basically taxi you all the way to the boss, skipping all the trash mob that you have to clear. Assassin is just really good at pumping damage, has a lot of utility, and you will never have any trouble fighting a party in the game, and it's just the best class in the entire game. Now, if you're new to Blade and Souls, the most important thing to understand is that every single class in this game have some kind of party utility. So there isn't really like a best class or worst class. Every class in the game brings something unique to the table, and so just play the class you find the coolest. They are always going to be a use for your party utility. In the original Blade and Souls, one of the funniest cheats involved this boss having 2 tanks, and then you have your tank taking turn dying on purpose, and then you're going to put your summoner cat on it to resurrect it, and you're just taking turn resurrecting, dying until the boss die. And it's so funny, and as a result, every party is going to want a summoner in this boss because it just cheeses the entire boss for you. Speaking of Summoner, the way Summoner play is that you have a familiar cat with you who can do stuff and attack with you together. Most importantly is that the cat can act independently on your own, and it can do stuff like taunting the boss or resurrecting one of your teammates when they're down without you having to do it yourself. The cat also have a really good utility, which is its ability to pin down an enemy that is knocked down, extending your knockdown a little bit and giving overall your team a little bit more of a free DPS uptime. However, Summoner have one of the more important party utility, just like Assassin, which is party-wide stealth. It's for the most part like a one-time iframe for the entire party and can be very useful to defeat certain boss mechanics. Summoner is very easy to play. It has the only team-wide healing in the entire game, making party run a lot smoother if you're new to the game. Now, Summoner's biggest advantage is that it is range. Pretty much 80% of the game is designed for melee characters, which means that just by being ranged, you're able to avoid potentially 80% of the enemy boss pattern, and you're able to DPS or keep up your survivability much easier compared to everyone else in the game. I think when you're new to the game, every party could appreciate a Summoner just because it makes the game a lot easier and a lot smoother. But when you're like at the higher level, higher tier, Summoners start to fall off since people are just better at keeping up DPS uptime as well as dodging. One of the things you'll notice about Blade and Soul is that different classes will share the same party utility. Both Summoner and Assassin have a party stealth and they don't stack, so you only really need one. And let's talk about the most important party utility in the entire game, Home Wound Block, which is available in Blade Dancers. But first, if you're enjoying the video, consider subscribing for more Blade and Soul Neo content. Blade Dancer is one of the easier to play DPS in the entire game. It has a lot of iframe, it has a lot of survivability, it is pretty easy to play. For the most part, Blade Dancer is just a selfish DPS who just do damage to the enemy and don't bring much to the table. You do have a grab utility which allows you to grab onto an enemy after you CC them to extend the DPS uptime for the rest of your party, similar to the Summoner's pinning ability. Blade Dancer's grab ability is a lot better than other grab ability available in the game, but the most important party utility for Blade Dancer is going to be the Home Wound Block. Home Wound Block is probably the most important utility in the entire game, and it's almost mandatory for every encounter. Home Wound Block allows you to resist up to 3 damage within the next 5 seconds and is used to skip over many major attacks or mechanics done by like every single boss, and it's probably the #1 thing every party will look for. However, just like how Summoner and Assassins share a party stealth utility, Home Wound Block is not exclusive to Blade Dancers. Home Wound Block is also available to Blade Masters, who is going to be the more preferred class. In my opinion, Blade Master is probably the best overall class in the entire game. It is the best tank in the entire game by far. Blade Master is going to be the dedicated tank next to Kung Fu Masters. That means that you're going to be expected to tank when it comes down to a dungeon run or a boss run, and your job is to avoid the enemy attack while keeping the enemy on the exact same place so that the rest of your party can freely DPS. In my opinion, tank has significantly more responsibility than any other person in the entire game, so Blade Masters is going to be a lot harder to play just because you're more responsible on studying the boss pattern. Blade Masters is one of the more complex classes to play, coming mostly in stance management. When you play Blade Masters, you're going to have 2 stances, your normal stance as well as your draw stance. And Blade Master complexity mainly comes from the fact that you have to manage your cooldown and the rotation between your 2 stances to properly do damage, on top of having to like tank the boss and stuff like that. Between Blade Masters and Kung Fu Masters, personally, I think Blade Master is a way better tank because Blade Master is more focused on defense, so it's a lot easier to survive boss pattern. Blade Master also hold aggro a lot better than Kung Fu Masters because you can start the boss with a Home Wound Block into immediately attacking it, where for Kung Fu Master, you kind of have to wait to build aggro a little bit. Blade Masters also have a very spammable block, which is very useful for bosses that require you to block for certain mechanics, like Poharan boss 1D Sashimi. Anyway, as mentioned, the most important part of the utility when it comes down to a Blade Master is going to be its Home Wound Block, and Home Wound Block do not stack. That means that you only need one of Blade Masters or Blade Dancers. If you have both within the same party, generally speaking, the Blade Master get priority on casting its Home Wound Block because it is the one who is tanking, so he can get control of the timing a lot better, which is the reason why Blade Dancer end up being a more selfish DPS, because the Home Wound Block is actually rendered obsolete compared to Blade Master's Home Wound Block. I think Blade Master is the best overall class in the entire game, and this is a class that I would play. The other dedicated tank in the entire game, Kung Fu Masters, is what I consider to be the hardest class to play in the entire game by far. Your rotation is kind of complex. You have to upkeep this buff called Searing Palm, and it's not the most difficult thing to do, but you also have to do a lot of animation cancels on top of like avoiding the boss pattern and stuff like that, and potentially tanking. There's so many things going on that Kung Fu Masters, in my opinion, is just really hard to play. Kung Fu Masters is what people like to refer to as an offensive tank in comparison to Blade Masters. So if you're trying to do more damage, you can take a Kung Fu Masters instead of a Blade Masters. The main party utility for Kung Fu Masters, other than being the tank of the team, is the blue buff. It is the exact same one as Assassins, likewise it doesn't stack, but again, you can have 2 in your party and you can just rotate between them. So you can have a Kung Fu Masters plus an Assassins rotating between your blue buff, or you can have like 2 Kung Fu Masters or 2 Assassins and stuff like that. Just like Assassins, Kung Fu Master has an easier time getting into a party because it provides blue buff, which people like really desire, on top of being able to tank, which means it fills 2 roles in the party at once. So Kung Fu Masters generally get higher priority. You shouldn't have trouble getting into a party as a Kung Fu Masters. Force Masters is probably the easiest class to play in the entire game. It is range, so just like Summoner, you can automatically avoid many of the major boss attack in the game. However, the other thing with Force Masters is that your gameplay is really simple, it's very spammy. You spam left click, right click, left click, right click, and that's it. Unlike other classes in the game, Force Masters doesn't have a frontal block, but instead it has a projectile shield for your entire party, which in my opinion is actually an advantage just because it is something new to the table. Otherwise, Force Master also have one of the better party utility, which is Ice Block for your entire team. It's very similar to your Hong Wen Block, which it basically prevents damage for your entire team for 3 seconds. And it's very useful, just like Hong Wen Block, to skip past or avoid many of the major boss attack or mechanics in the entire game. Hong Wen Block is still preferred over the Ice Block, but since it doesn't share a cooldown, you can stack or basically rotate between the 2 party iframe to get consistent party iframe going for your entire team, making you guys able to avoid many of the boss attack. Otherwise, Force Masters is a pretty decent DPS class. It's able to upkeep DPS a lot easier just because it is range. So you might hear people say like Force Masters do less damage than other class, but the reality is that because you're range and you can upkeep your damage a lot easier, you will often just out DPS other people, especially people who are lesser experienced at playing their class and avoiding damage. However, otherwise, Force Masters is pretty low on the party prioritization list just because it doesn't bring a lot to the table compared to stuff like Hong Wen Block and Blue Buff. Finally, we have Destroyer, which is like the bot class. It brings like nothing to the table and it just attack. As a Destroyer, you kind of just swing your axe onto your boss and that's really it. You have a very simple combo. You don't really have a lot of party utility. You have like a grab, but it's outclassed by Blade Dancer's Phantom Glass significantly. You have like a little stone shield that allow you to prevent the party from taking damage a little bit, or to like resurrect one of your down member a little faster and safer. But both of those can just be avoided by playing better and not taking damage from the rest of your party, which is of course not always possible. They do have spin to win grouping for trash mob in dungeons, but it's not really that important. Most importantly, the funniest thing about Destroyer is that you're probably going to see a bunch of Destroyer bot in the entire game, because for some reason, when it comes down to botting in Blade and Souls, the go-to class is just Destroyer, and so you just see a bunch of Destroyer bot, and if you're playing a Destroyer, you're going to get called a bot, like literally, on top of like not doing a lot of stuff. So that is quite hilarious. When I was playing on Blade and Soul Neo Korea, I just see a bunch of Destroyer bot, and it's like hilarious. That being said, that is for the brief overview for all the class, and most importantly, like what they kind of bring to the table and how I would like kind of rank them. But again, like the tier lists don't really matter. Just play the class you find fun. So let me know in the comment what class you're gonna play on Blade and Soul Neo launch, and if this video helped you out, consider dropping a like as well as subscribing and maybe sharing with your friends.